con el auspicio de Plenitud, Ciudad de la Alegría, hogarplenitud.org.es, Serenidad Spa Terapéutico, Serenidad.es, Permasalud Glamping, permasalud.com.
As I mentioned you, Suzanne is with us today, and I have tons of questions for her because not only me, but fans have written wanting to know about Suzanne. So we're gonna travel through your musical journey, Suzanne. And to start in the very beginning, how did you start your musical journey? With what instrument?
I started with the piano. So when I was growing up, we had a Steinway piano in our home. I had 4 sisters. And so we were, my older sisters were taking piano lessons. And I gravitated to the piano and fell in love with it. And there's another long story behind that, but that's how I started.
Great. And how did you discover electronic music? I mean, any particular composer that you were influenced by? I don't know, Wendy Carlos, Isa Tomita, or the older ones. How did you discover that?
Actually, I discovered electronic music by discovering the instruments. So I wasn't, consciously focused on any music. I was in college. And our brother's school, I went to a women's college near Boston, and our brother's school was MIT. And our music class, which was very small, about 7 people, I was majoring in music at college, went to MIT one evening, and we met a professor who was trying to get the computer to make a sound. And honestly, that's the first time I heard of that. It was probably in 1967. And I didn't know about anything else. And then, as luck would have it, I guess you could say, I went to graduate school on the West Coast, the University of California at Berkeley. And there I discovered, it wasn't immediate, but I discovered this whole new world, primarily through the San Francisco Tape Music Center and Don Buchla, meeting Don Buchla himself. So suddenly I was inundated with this phenomenon of musical instruments that could make music.
What happened here? Amazing, amazing. And you were there in the university, but you chose to go Buchla and not Moog. Why was that?
Well, I came under Don Buchla's spell because as soon as I graduated from Berkeley, I went to work for Don Buchla, and he showed me, really, I think, the real essence of what this was all about. So in those days, we didn't have a lot of communication. I mean, there was no internet, there was no email, we did have phones, but you had to know the number. And it was just a different world. And Don Buchla and Bob Moog had started at about the same time. But the difficulty in those days was that nobody understood that this was a musical instrument. So Bob Moog put a keyboard on it so that people could say, oh, yeah, it's a musical instrument. But that, as Don Buchla said, the keyboard was the enemy. The keyboard was a quote unquote inappropriate interface. And it became the evil, the evil doom of electronic music, because the essence of Buchla's instrument was already more sophisticated voltage control. You have voltage control with a keyboard, but it's very simple. It's, one action makes one note. It's primitive. It's more of a translation of, instrumental concept from a different world. Electronic music was a new world. And I think we lost an understanding of that almost immediately.
And also, I was reading that, like Buchla, in contrast to Moog, Moog was more like a engineer, a technician, and Buchla had notions of music. Is that correct?
They were both, Buchla was in many ways self-taught. He was a genius.
Mm-hmm.
And he was, I think he studied physics, and he was an inventor. So, he made hearing aids and other, he was I call him the Leonardo da Vinci of electronic music instrument design, because he he generated ideas, original ideas that were just unpredictable. Like, Leonardo da Vinci predicted airplanes and helicopters. I mean, where did that come from? And Don Buchla did amazing interfaces. So the interface, there's technology, but an instrument is primarily something that you need to interact with in order to make it come alive. So a violin interface is the strings and the bow, and a wind interface is the fingers and the breathing. And the Buchla interface was touch plates and voltages that you could control, many, many types of voltages. The Moog, I think that Bob Moog clearly had the same idea in the beginning, but because of the market and commerce, and because these things were a business, in order to create these instruments, you had to be able to market them. And Buchla never, he was very self-propelled, and he didn't follow the market. He was rather arrogant in ways, which was that I don't want you to understand what I'm doing. I want to do what I'm doing, and then you just have to figure it out. So he didn't cater to the market. And so that was the difference. Bob Moog became famous instantly because his instruments could be used in rock and roll. And Wendy Carlos did Switched on Bach, which was Baroque music. Nothing wrong with doing that. But Buchla was looking at a different approach, a new approach.
So did you build your first Buchla? Did you do it yourself?
Well, I was working in the factory, sitting at a table, assembling, integrated circuit boards, and all those instruments. This was the one that eventually got. It was the 200. We were making the 200 series, and they were all being shipped out. And it was heartbreaking for me because I was building them and they were going away. So I made up my mind that I was going to own one of those. And if you want something enough, at least in my life, if you do want something enough, you can manifest it. And I manifested a Buchla 200.
Amazing. Yeah, did it cost a lot? But I mean,
yeah,
yeah,
it did cost a lot. And that was, people complain even today that the Buchla is expensive, but it's worth it.
It's worth it.
So I didn't say, oh, I can't afford it. I said, gee, I guess I need to make money. And so, yeah. So, that was the impetus, the inspiration, the thrust behind my commercial work. I said, I need to make money. I tried to make money in other areas, and I learned, I made furniture for a while. I learned that if you could find a path that was in alignment with your, primary goal, which mine was making music, that you were better off than going to work for a bank or driving a taxi cab or whatever it was, because there would be a synergy. When I worked in commercials, I learned so much. I was always creating music and working as an artist. in the commercial field.
Amazing. So, like,
Yeah.
what is this multidimensional kinesthetic input port that I was reading about, and that it made the difference from the Moog? This is there
Hold on.
something like that? Multidimensional kinetic input port?
Yes. Sorry, I got this interruption. Okay, here is the multiple.
Oh,
I love
wow.
Buch's descriptive names of
Yeah.
this is the multi-dimensional kinesthetic input port.
And that's
Buchla had,
amazing.
yeah, he had a way with words, the source of uncertainty. You know, he just had a way of languaging these ideas that were really poetic and meaningful. So this is, in fact, multidimensional. It's kinesthetic. You touch it. It's an input port. So I input commands, and those commands are translated. I define. It's multidimensional. If I hit a key, any number of things can happen. That key is not, it doesn't have a pre-assigned function. It's not like a piano keyboard where the function is to change the pitch up and down. This key can do anything. It's multidimensional. So I can have it change a timbre, change a spatial position, give a command to a sequencer, stop or start, transpose. There are so many things it can do. So this is very powerful, and it's a different concept. And if you look at the design of the keyboard, it is shaped like with the angle of the hand. So our hands aren't like this. That's a bit awkward. My hand relaxed looks like this. And this is an example of Don Buchla's brilliant analysis of the human body as it interfaces with the instrument.
That's amazing. I was just wondering, just as I was listening to you, I was thinking about Jean-Michel Jarre, and I don't know what kind of does he use anything like this? Because I've seen him like playing like I don't know. It's so bizarre, playing just with his hands and no touching instruments, but strange things.
Yes. I mean, there are so many interfaces that we have now. And in fact, in France, there was a center called IRCAM, and Boulez, the famous composer, worked with Max Matthews, who is the father of computer music and a great designer. I mean, he passed away not that long ago, but Max created interfaces for Boulez, a wand that could conduct. And they say that wand then became one of the tools in video games. You know, these things designed to control music also could interface with other
Yeah.
problems to solve, you know.
Amazing.
So yeah, Jean-Michel, there's no there in electronic music. I mean, with me, right now, I'm in a period of dedication to the Buchla. But, you know, in truth, there are many, many contributors to this music. I also use an Animoog, which is a little iPad instrument. I also use processing by Eventide H9, and those are my main tools. Jean-Michel uses, you know, what he chooses to use. I'm doing a kind of, I have a unique pathway because I come from a very focused root system in electronic music that says that the instrument is live performable and it's analog. So I don't like to use samples. I don't like to use pre-recorded sounds. I'm generating the sound as I play it. On the other hand, I recently did a performance in New York and San Francisco, and I'm going to play in Chicago, where I've been asked to incorporate some of the music from my Seven Waves album. And this is like, oh no, I can't, But anyway, we went back to the multi-tracks and transferred all the individual tracks. So I'm not using a recording of, the master Seven Waves. I'm using the elements, but they are samples, but they're my samples, right? They're whatever. I don't know if I have to justify it, but it's a slight departure for me.
Yeah, because you're focused. We'll listen at the end of the show with quadraphonic music from your album. Amazing. I mean, all of it. We're starting like even with the Buchla concert parts of it. But before we go to the music, I want to ask you a couple more questions. Like, how was it to be a women pioneer in electronic music back in the 70s when you started with this?
Well, I was always kind of surprised when I hit a bump or when I recognized that I was being judged, negatively for being a woman. It always came as a surprise to me. And I think that's because, my experience in the beginning, I grew up in a family of women. I have 4 sisters. There were 5 girls. We were the dominant force. Although my father was an Italian, authoritarian. Then I went to a women's college, Wellesley College. And again, I was just in a world of women and we were capable. And it wasn't until I went to graduate school that I confronted this reality that women weren't thought of as capable. And it was like, what? I was just always astonished and didn't know what to do with it. When somebody would say, oh, women have no right on the podium. They're not supposed to conduct. Women can't compose. Women can't understand technology. Women, it was like, what? So on the other hand, I was lucky because I was so in love with this technology because it promised to liberate me from the man's world. The world was not looking for women composers.
That's right.
They were not. I needed to make a living. I needed to be professional. And I was lucky in that I was in love with an instrument that gave me a unique voice and the power to offer something that wasn't being offered in the commercial world. I didn't really have any competition. I wasn't even fighting other men. There weren't any.
Yeah, but it was difficult those days, right? It was hard anyway for trying to bring your music and say, I'm a woman. What's wrong? You had that idea, but society was a bit different. But you succeeded. Look where you are.
Yeah, society misunderstood, but the people with their levers on the power, they were the real problem.
Yeah, I imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, like we have a fan that wanted to know, and I had to ask you this. This person wanted to know if you created the sound effects for the Star Wars, the movie, or the the Miko album, Star Wars and Other Galactic Funk?
Yes, it was the Miko album.
It's amazing. Yeah. It's amazing. I just listened to it yesterday, the whole album. It's a great art, and the sounds. I would immediately know when you were coming in because all the sound effects are amazing. Amazing, Suzanne. So yeah, that's great because he just wanted to be clear where those sound effects were.
Yes.
Great. And your first album, Seven Waves, what did you feel internally to know that you were ready to bring out Seven Waves to the world? especially Japan, where it was succeeding.
Well, I was ready years before it actually came out. I mean, this was my dream, was to do this album. But talk about expensive. In those days, recording was really expensive because we didn't have home studios. There was no home recording equipment. It was just starting to come in. And I think towards the end of my album, I did have a home studio. But before that, I had to rent a commercial studio for a whole weekend. And so I would, again, I focused on making money. I took the money. And once I blocked out that studio for the weekend, I didn't care how much it cost or whether things were going to go well or not, because I didn't want to bring any anxiety or worry about money into the project. So my mantra was, to calm myself down and not think, oh my gosh, I hope I can finish it this weekend because I'm paying and I don't have the money, and oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Instead of worrying, my mantra was, there is nothing to do and everything will get done. So it put
Very
me
Taoist.
Yeah.
Quite
Yes.
Taoist. Yeah.
It was. And I just came up with that and it worked because I was so, this album meant so much to me that I didn't want to contaminate it with any negative feelings or energy. And so everything that happened, even if there was a breakdown and we lost a half a day, I was just calm.
Flowing.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Well, how about if we listen to some music? We'll go for a part of your 1975 Buchla concert and
Okay.
the fourth wave from your first album. And also we'll have a little part from the Miko album on Star Wars so people can listen to the sound effects. How about that?
That
Great.
sounds great. Okay.
Este es el espacio de New Age.
Plenitud, Ciudad de la Alegría, hogar sustituto para adultos mayores. Contáctanos al 099-753-8085.
I have all your albums here, Suzanne, actually. You see, these are all your
Oh.
albums. And I have more over there because I just couldn't put them. So I see, when you mentioned earlier that you had already a studio, you referred to this one in Velocity of Love?
That was my big studio. So I
Uh-huh.
started out with a studio in my apartment in New York. And that was in my living room. And it got, my business got so big and successful, and I had a lot of people. And I kind of felt obliged to build an outside studio. But I always loved my home studio more.
Wow, it's beautiful. And in this album, Velocity of Love, I read that you worked with Vangelis for a couple of songs. Is that right?
Yes,
How
that's
was that?
right.
How was that experience with Vangelis?
It was life-changing.
Really?
Oh my goodness. I'm just so amazed because I think it was my assistant at the time, Marina Belica. She said, Vangelis is, in New York. Why don't we reach out to him? And I thought, really? Can we do that? And we reached out. And he was such a force in my musical life because he had such heart and soul and passion. He was using keyboards, so his approach was very different. Although in those days, I was doing studio albums, so it wasn't live Buchla. The 1975 was live Buchla, but then my life, evolved and changed for many reasons, and many reasons, and electronic instruments started to proliferate, and then I was working with those instruments, a lot of instruments, Roland, Yamaha, Korg, everything but Moog. Because Moog had been the enemy. But Now they're my best friend, or they have been. Um, but anyway, I went to England to his studio and brought my multi-tracks.
The Vangelis
So I had
studio?
all, yeah.
Okay. Uh-huh.
So I brought my multi-track. So I had already recorded a lot of the, tracks, but I left spaces for him. And so we worked there in his studio and he overdubbed, very, very fast stuff. Then we did some overdubbing in my studio when he came to New York. And that was so much fun. The things that I learned from him that are embodied in my music now is the sensitivity of his communication. He was a gentle soul who could interpret emotion by the touch of how he expressed. So he was playing the CS-80, and that had a ribbon controller. And that ribbon controller, nobody could play it the way he could. He played it like, a violin. It was just so sensitive. And today, whenever I play, I use an analogue, which again is kind of related in that it's a touch sensation, touch communication. And when I play, I think of Vangelis and how he would have played.
That's amazing. I was so surprised to read that, and like I was amazed because that's such a beautiful work of art that you've done in your album so far and until then, and it was like amazing. So, how did you get acquainted with private music?
Well, Peter Baumann had been okay. Let's see. How can I shut off the sound on this computer for all these interruptions? Oh, well, if you don't mind, it's okay. Okay, so Peter Baumann had worked with Tangerine Dream. And I was fascinated by Tangerine Dream because they were having success in Europe. And I thought, well, this means that it's possible. It's possible to, be in the recording industry with electronic music. And Peter came to New York kind of on his own. He left Tangerine Dream. And he came to New York with this big custom-made electronic music instrument that was kind of digital. It had a big memory system. And he lived right near, not far from where I lived. And one day he called me out of the blue. I was very well known for being, the top in music technology. And he called me and he said, I understand you have, I don't remember which drum machine it was, but I had the first one in New York. And I said, yes, I have that drum machine. He said, I'd like to come over and see it. So he came over and in my studio, and that's how we met. Then we worked on a project together in his studio. It was called Steve. It never came out. And it might someday. It's my alter ego. I sound like a gay man. And then he decided to start a record label. And up to that time, I did not sign a traditional label deal because my albums were my children and I wasn't going to give them away. So I licensed my music. I licensed it to RCA, to JVC, to Finadar, Atlantic Finadar. And Peter said to me, you've got to help me get my label started. Don't worry. Everything will come back to you. And he wanted a traditional record deal, and I did it on that word. And of course, it didn't work like that. I lost 5 masters.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, when they moved, and you moved also to California, you lost, I think, Hotel Luna or something, one of them. Or
well, no, I lost every album that was on there, but now they're coming back because there's a United States law that says that after 35 years, the rights to a recording, the master rights, revert back to the artist. This is especially important in electronic music because the music actually lives in the recording. It's not like, people do cover songs or the music has a different life. So anyway, I'm starting to get those back because it's been 35 years.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So we're going to move towards Neverland.
Okay.
How many instruments were part of Neverland, and you played them all? Or was it? It's just such a work, Suzanne. I just love your work. It's like Neverland is a very special album as well. It's like progressing in exquisiteness of your work.
That's one of the ones that I have back now.
Really?
That was the first album that I did on private music. And so now it's 35 years later.
Private music doesn't exist anymore, does it?
It doesn't, but what happens is that they get bought. So first BMG bought them. Then BMG became Sony. So there's this ongoing, mindless, discontinuous ownership.
Yeah, it's sad.
Sony doesn't even know they own my music. But they do, but they don't. I'm getting it back.
That's
so anyway, Neverland. Neverland was the first album, and it initiated. Let's just say that the last piece on the Velocity of Love, the song "The Velocity of Love," had a piano. By the way, the fourth wave has a piano. Yeah, that has a piano too. So, but anyway, because I had a history in writing and composing for traditional acoustic instruments, I found myself gradually incorporating more acoustic instruments. It just happened. It wasn't a thought process. All the way to the culmination of doing a pure orchestra album, Dream Suite. So you've recognized a trend that those instruments started to be added. Yeah.
And so, like, up to Neverland, which songs of the ones that you composed were the closest to you, and why? Which ones like you held very dear from Seven
Well, they
Waves
were all
Time?
very dear. They were all very dear.
Yeah.
They were my children, yeah. So, Neverland is not fresh on my brain right now, but I did always credit every instrument, even every electronic instrument, every processing. So if you look on the credits, do you see acoustic players being credited on Neverland?
Let's see. Acoustic players. Well, there's all programming and no.
It's all programming. There are no acoustic players.
Additional arrangements, texture, arrangements, synth guitar and mosaic, Ari Frankel, and synth guitar on mosaic.
Okay.
But mainly arrangements. Yeah, I don't see like acoustic.
So this was before I added acoustics.
Uh-huh.
In a big way.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. I did do a performance of the Neverland album with players. I had a percussion, a bass player, because I needed to go out and perform. This was the reality behind the life of a recording artist is that you have to be able to perform it.
Yes, definitely. In those days, everything has changed so much. I know you're going to China soon, but like the world of music has changed so much that we can talk about it a little later. But there was something I wanted to ask you about your record label. You albums, record label, and more are around waves. So in what way is the ocean and the waves meaningful to you that you've chosen that as as your essence in your labels?
Yes. Again, many reasons for that. One, I was just, and I still am, attracted to the ocean as a creative space. I look out now at the sea from my studio window, and it represents a clearing space. It's not, especially in the beginning, it was untouched, or a space that hadn't been encroached upon or felt as if it hadn't. Now it's polluted and all kinds of problems are going on underneath the sea. But so that was one ideology for me, was that the sea was a spiritual place, an abstract creative space. The other one was that the wave itself created a dynamic that attracted me compositionally. What kind of architecture do you use when you're composing? Classical architecture, they had the sonata form and this form, and it was all based on harmony and sections, theme A, theme B, development, recap. So there's always an underlying concept in the architecture of composition, music composition. And for me, I thought, this is a ballad shape, this slow building, and then a release. And so that became the shape of my compositions. The other thing I loved about it was that it provided a more feminine, I felt, sense of rhythm. So the ocean has rhythm expressed by the waves crashing on the shore. It goes on forever. It is reliable. It is variable, but consistent. But it's not a drummer going boom, 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 boom. Everybody wants music to have that pumping sound. And that's not me. I don't do dance music. And it's not that I don't like dance music. It's just that I do what I do and not let others do. There are other people who want to do that, and they can do it. I could do it, but it wouldn't be in my soul. I could do a nice, probably very competent, expression of it, but why bother?
Yeah, that's great.
So my rhythm is the ocean.
Yeah, you have to be like yourself, and that's why I asked you, your connection to the ocean, and you just explained it clearly. So let's hear some music from the following albums. We'll have The Velocity of Love, History of My Heart, Neverland, and Tuscany from these both albums.
Right.
Síguenos en TikTok, Facebook e Instagram como GoyPazR, Vimeo y YouTube como Radio Serenidad ES. En WhatsApp 593-999-203-203, radioserenidad.com.
Suzanne, how would you compare your electronic versus your acoustic journeys?
Well, the acoustic music was really my childhood. And it was very formative because I was, that was where I concentrated. I would play the piano for, 4 hours a day, whatever, timeless, unending involvement in the piano. I think of myself primarily as a composer. So I did have a career as a pianist, and I did tour the world as a pianist. But I played only my own music. I wrote for myself. And, I grew up on Chopin. And what I loved about Chopin was that he was, quote unquote, pianistic. He knew how to write for the piano so that you could perform that music. It sounded very difficult, but because he had a technique that was so integrated with the capabilities of the piano, he used a lot of keys that were black note keys because it laid under the fingers more easily. So I brought that consciousness to my piano music also, and I wrote in ways that were, to me, pianistic. But because I think of myself primarily as a composer, the electronic instrument was more powerful for me because it is a compositional instrument. The Buchla is a composing, performing instrument.
And in what way, like your acoustic training, your musical training, contributed to develop alternative sounds in the electronic instrument, in the Buchla?
Well, the Buchla is a special case. But I can tell you that, the principles of acoustic orchestration translate perfectly into the sonic realms of frequencies and, velocities. So I think that traditional training it's musical training. And you can apply the musicianship, a lot of it has to do if you're writing for acoustic instruments, you have to understand the instruments, the limitations of the instruments, how they're played and all that. Those are principles if you're writing for acoustic instruments. But there are other principles that have to do with sound. The distance from the bass to the next sound can be much bigger than, say, that, as the frequencies go up, the notes can get closer together. That's a principle. I love principles, when I'm analyzing whether it be composition or sound design. You look for the abstract principles that you apply, especially in sound design, because you're analyzing and creating something that doesn't exist. Yeah.
Beautiful. Like, what is... Well, this is so... I have a question that I don't know how to exactly phrase it, but what's the history of your heart that inspired you since Velocity of Love all the way to History of My Heart? It's like I noticed the history of my heart being in one album, and then you have it being in the Velocity of Love, and then you also have a whole album of the history of my heart. And I know you're such a sensitive person. I was wondering, what is this history of your heart that you share with us?
It's basically a war zone. I think, the source of my music was always emotional. I thought of myself as an Italian, with that. I grew up on Italian opera, passion, drama, romance, all of that was melody where I came from. And that emotion, when you're a young woman or a young person, your experiences in emotional connection with another human being, an intimate connection, it's not easy, those experiences, because they are idealized. We have these idealized ideas about what it's going to be, and then reality whacks us. And so the history of my heart is basically, glorious, amazing feelings and complete devastation happened.
I saw you in San Francisco. It was a piano. It was in a hotel, I think. And you were with your husband, but I think you were newlywed or something like that. I remember seeing you there. And, it just stays with me because it was, I studied in Berkeley, but not the Acupressure Institute in Berkeley. And I had, while I was living there, the opportunity of just going to see some musicians, Shadowfax and Philip Auberg, and you were there, and I was able to see you, and it was like, breeze for the heart is amazing. So I remember you even from then. So we're going to do now is we're going to listen to two songs, the same song in the acoustic and the electronic version. And I chose Inverness from History of My Heart and Pianissimo 1, and then Mozart from The History of My Heart and Pianissimo. It's like for people to listen both options and compare.
Wonderful. Great idea. Thank you.
Abre las puertas de tu mundo interior y permanece con New Age.
Suzanne, in what way do you express your Italian heritage in Hotel Luna? Sounds, textures, connection to places, I don't know.
Hotel Luna was really the origin of my discovery of my family. So I went on a mission. I frequently would travel to do the writing of my albums because that way I could focus more on the music, have no distractions, go to a place where nobody knew me. And that was great. So with Hotel Luna, my purpose when I wrote that album was to go to Italy and discover my family. I hadn't really met them. So I went to Italy and I found my family. And my cousin, I said I was looking for a place to write. And she suggested Capri. And I thought, oh my gosh, it's an island. How will I get, I needed a piano. But I was a Yamaha artist at the time. And we contacted Yamaha. And they said, no problem. We'll send her by boat. We'll send a piano over. So I rented this villa for about 4 or 5 months. And it was winter. So it was cold. And I could see Hotel Luna outside of my window. And that's how it got named. But that began the story of my connection with my family. Now, I just came back from my family last week. I spent a week in Mirabella, which is where my family lives and where they're from. And the connection started with Hotel Luna. And it's been a beautiful story, a magical story. I wish I were a writer because it all started because my grandfather wanted to marry a particular, his sweetheart in Mirabella. And his parents said no. And he said, well, then I'm going to go to America. He was a doctor. He was a young doctor. And he went to America in 1905. He sent a postcard every day to my grandmother. And after a year, she went to Boston with the instructions, don't get off the boat until you're married. She came with a chaperone. And so they were married in the harbor in Boston on that boat. And that's how our family started, our American family. Now, because my grandfather was the oldest son, in Italy, the oldest son inherits everything. He left all that. He didn't stay to inherit the big house. So when I go back, I see this story. I see the house where he was born. I see all the medical books in the library and the history of the family. And it feels like my home. And those are my family. And I've watched them, I've watched them get married, have children, all the chapters of life. And it's beautiful.
What a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing it. Now, Suzanne, you went through a difficult health situation. Did overcoming that health issue inspire you to compose any songs, or did it change many things in your life?
Well, it changed everything because that was the situation that led me to leave New York City after 19 years. Wow. So I had a life. I had an established career. I had everything going. I got an early breast cancer. I confronted my mortality and I said, whoops, I guess I need to make a change. It was instinctive, like an animal almost. I have to leave here. I have to leave. And I basically left. I left my studio. I left everything. and I fled. I wanted to go to Italy, but it wasn't in the cards because I wasn't. My father didn't want me to go to Italy. He was sick. So anyway, I went to California, and everything changed because I left my big studio with all the fancy equipment and the staff and the people, and I came to a little cabin on the ocean that overlooks, I look out of the window, and I've been here ever since. So that was 32 years ago that I came here. And I started to write again for the piano. I went back to this simplicity, to an acoustic expression. My Buchla was broken. It didn't work. And I gravitated to the piano, and I wrote songs. I called them the window songs, just looking out of the window. So I wrote, the butterflies, the full moon coming up over the hill, the eagle flying, the surfers surfing, all these things that I could see from my window.
Amazing. Yeah, sometimes we have to go through difficult situations to make life-changing situations in our lives. But you mentioned Chopin earlier, but you have two songs about Mozart. And so I was wondering, how did that meeting with such a composer impacted you? I mean, there's two songs about Mozart, meeting Mozart and Mozart. So why Mozart and not Chopin?
Well, the truth is that there are a lot of classical composers underpinning my music. So, the Inverness piece is Respighi. The Mosaic piece is more Bartók. I do reference classical composers, even without literally saying that. But yeah, Mozart, that was kind of a humorous thing in a way. The first piece, the Mozart piece, was just, I felt a certain kind of connection, his charm, his fun. Mozart was not a serious, heavy person. And so that came to me. And then the other piece, Mozart, so there's Mozart and Meeting Mozart. Meeting Mozart is more, in the pocket of one of his piano concertos, a melody like that. And again, I think it has a lightness and a charm that I get from him.
Yeah, that's great. So, and how was your experience recording with the Young Russia Orchestra in Dream Suite? Was it that? I think it was the first experience you had with orchestras. Was it? I'm not sure.
Well, yeah. I mean, Dream Suite was, that was the first album I did when I left New York. So I started it in New York, and I came out to California, and finished it. But I was working also with Walter Rame, who was a New York orchestrator. And sadly, he passed away, and I that's such a loss for me, because sometimes when somebody passes away and you haven't communicated what you wanted to tell that person, you just feel this desperate. I think the whole time that we were working together, I was so stressed by my cancer, that recovering and dealing with all of that I didn't have the, emotional bandwidth to really give myself to the appreciation of, what he helped me accomplish. But anyway, that's a side story. Working with the orchestra, I did an analysis of, where to record. I wanted it to be a youth orchestra. So it's not difficult music. And I thought this would be perfect to use a young orchestra. And there was one in Florida, and the problem was really financial. With unions and other things, going to Russia was an economic choice primarily. And it was a very wild experience. I feel as if I went through the
tunnel.
the tunnel there. It was like, yeah, it was wild. It was a wild experience.
And that are really fun in Dream Seed, it's another great thing. And you had a live album with the Waves, you call them the Waves, that includes great musicians. I mean, Paul McCandless, Michael Manring, so many great musicians.
Yeah.
How was that experience? And have you considered touring in that way again someday?
The amount of energy that it took to pull that off, I don't think I'm up to that anymore. There are a lot of chapters of my past life that, maybe they didn't get the visibility in some ways that I would have hoped, but there's no repeating. I'm not a repeater. Yeah. But I loved it. It was a very precious experience to work with musicians.
Well, let's listen then some music from these albums. Okay, we're going to listen to Simple Song from Hotel Luna, Meeting Mozart from Dream Suite, Mother Song, which was used as a part of the movie for Mother Teresa. And we'll have Anthem live with the Waves. How's that?
Great. Sounds great.
Respira profundo y fluye con New Age.
Suzanne, you experienced with vocals in some of your albums. Did it come easy to write lyrics? I think you wrote some lyrics, but your sister also wrote some lyrics, like for the Silver Ship. How was experiencing with vocals?
I was never attracted to vocals, even when I was doing commercial work, because I'm more interested in what's underneath the vocals. When there are words in a vocal, that's all you hear. That's the entire message. And my ears, as a composer, I like to experience the undercurrents and the totality of what's there. And so I tend not to focus on the voice and lyrics. I did write Mother Teresa that had vocal and lyrics. It was never published, the vocal, but now I'm thinking it is time. Now that she has, clearly been established as the saint that she is. When the song was written, I met Mother Teresa, and she was what an experience it was just to be in the same space with her. I can't, really, there was a power there that was undeniable. But they were nervous back then that if there were a song about her, that she would be considered, she was criticized often because she had so much media attention. And she used that media attention to accomplish the good things that she wanted to do. And some people thought, she's just after publicity. And that was absurd, that was absurd. But she had to deal with that, that consideration of her. So we didn't release the song back then. But now it's time.
Good.
So I'm finding, once you make a decision, an opening occurs, an opening is created. And it seems like every place I go now, people either, this Mother Teresa is every place now. So I think that song will find an opening.
Oh, that's good. I guess you'll let us know when.
Yes.
Okay, so have you ever been to the Galapagos Islands? That's part of Ecuador. So I was wondering if you have ever been here, because I know you wrote the music for the documentary about the Galapagos, A Musical Odyssey by Robert Grimstone. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, how was that?
He's still there, and what a remarkable, naturalist and filmmaker. Robert Grimstone is. We haven't stayed in touch, but yes, I did go to the Galapagos.
How fun!
Yeah, it happened all of a sudden. Somebody called me. It was just before Thanksgiving many years ago, and somebody said, "Can you go to the Galapagos?" Because we have an opening on the boat. Somebody couldn't go. And so I said, I packed up my things and went.
And how was that experience?
Well, it was wonderful, and it was kind of funny because, Robert was our leader in that expedition, and he showed me some of his work, his film work, and I just thought, wow, we should do a project together. So one night we were playing backgammon, and I was winning, and I said, okay, if I win, this will happen. And if you win, that will happen. And what would happen for him was that we would make this film together. And it got to a point, the last roll of the dice for him, he had to make double sixes. That was the only thing that would let him win. And he rolled double sixes. Wow. And so I love these, communications from wherever they come from that seem to, I'm vulnerable to those. I take coaching from the universe. So we did that project together. And, it was a difficult time. I think it was during when it came out, there was the economic crash of 2008.
Yeah, we've been having all the time all those crashes.
But
you mean world? You mean worldy, like world? Yeah.
You couldn't release anything. We did the whole thing, and it was just the whole industry died. DVDs were not viable, so it didn't happen.
How did you manage, by the way, as you mentioned that? How did you manage that change from LPs to CDs and then to MP3s? And I mean, if you make something like quadraphonics, and gosh, in an MP3, the sound quality is not as good as the LP or even the CD. So how was that change for you, of the musical history?
Well, there was a period when piracy was so rampant that I really stopped making music, because it was an insult, for somebody to say, well, it's free. I'm going to just, and I'm working, round the clock for a year, to do an album and spending all this money. And then somebody says, well, it's mine. And so I just thought that was an insult, and I didn't work. And that's how that affected me. But that, that adjusted. My life has been long. My career has been long. I've seen a lot of things come and go and come again. And right now, because I perform in quadraphonic, my record label is dedicated to quadraphonic. And making a quad LP is not a piece of cake. And does anybody care? I don't know, but it's a principle. I have to release in quadraphonic. So that's what I do on my own label, but I do co-releases with other labels that are not quadraphonic, like the Jonathan Fatoussi album. Yeah. Have you heard that one?
No.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I don't. What's the name of it? What's the title?
It's called Golden Apples of the Sun.
Oh, no, I don't have that one.
Okay, it's new.
Oh, it just came out. Oh, great.
A while ago, but not that long ago.
Yeah, because actually my last album I have from you is Silver Ship. It's like, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, there have been a lot of Buchla albums since then. Yeah, like improvisation on 4 sequences. That's in vinyl. We haven't made CDs. You don't have them.
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, the musical industry, it's changed so much that people are not. Very few people, I think, I don't know what your experience are, actually buying CDs and everything. You listen on your phone. Stereo systems are disappearing. It's amazing. It just, the sound quality is from this, it's going all the way to this, and so it is a big change. I don't know why this is happening, but it's time we reconsider quality of sound. So,
well, you can download, high quality digital of my music on
your website.
Yeah. It's in quadraphonic, or some of it is stereo compatible.
Will do. Yeah. That's great. You have that in your website, so your fans can go to your website and get it directly from there.
Yes, I think so, and it's also on Bandcamp.
Okay, good. Good to know. Good to know.
Yeah.
So now we're going to listen, Turning, from your Turning album, If I Could, from Pianissimo 3, and Silver Sheep, with the lyrics of your sister, right? And she also did some covers of your music.
She's a fine artist.
She's an artist too.
Oh yeah, she's amazing. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. So let's listen to this, and then we'll be back for the last part of the show.
Okay.
Permítenos acompañarte con New Age.
Plenitud, Ciudad de la Alegría, hogar sustituto para adultos mayores. Contáctanos al 099-753-8085.
Okay, Suzanne, thank you first of all for all your time. And now we are in the last part of the interview. And I know you're touring nowadays mainly to do the Buchla concerts. Where will your travels take you?
Well, my next concert's in May, just around the corner. I'll be doing a concert in Chicago, and I go from Chicago directly to China, to Shenzhen. And I'm very excited to go to mainland China because it's been in my list of goals for my whole career. I've always wanted to go to China. I don't know why.
And do you have lots of fans there? I mean, how do you know how your music is going to be accepted? How does it happen?
I don't know. I guess I'll find out when I get there. The way I run my concertizing now is that I don't solicit. I need to be invited. So if I want to play in China, I don't go, looking for opportunities in China. I don't, my feeling is that if I am invited, I know they want me. Yeah. And it's much easier to do that, kind of all the energy that it takes to go there. It feels better.
Wow, and China, that's it's the first time in China?
Yes.
Wow.
I played in Taiwan. I've played in I didn't play in Hong Kong, but I've been to Hong Kong. So yeah.
I know you've been in Argentina. You've been in some places in South America. So that's amazing. I wish I could bring you here to Ecuador. I would have to see how people react, and maybe we can bring you here. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm not performing on the piano anymore. I'm like Buchla, and the kids love it. So my audience now is very young because they're the ones. Yeah, they're interested in Euro rack. They want analog. They went backwards to the analog instruments, and that's my specialty.
Oh, amazing! So now, what can you tell us about quadraphonic? How can we really appreciate listening? I put my headphones on when I was listening in YouTube. Your quadraphonic is like, oh my God, like the sounds traveling from one ear to the other. But how can we appreciate it better?
Well, for many years when I started out, it existed only in live performance because you couldn't, there was no technology for recording it back then and delivering it. So I still think of it as a live performance experience. So that's the best way to experience it, is go to a live concert. Other than that, a lot of people have systems that are based on their, entertainment video. So they have 5-1 systems, and those 5-1 systems can be used to play a live quadraphonic recording.
And what are you exploring in this album, in this composition, in quadraphonic experience?
I'm basically expressing the design of the Buchla. So Don Buchla, we use spatial movement. It's not about placement particularly, it's about movement. And what he discovered was that movement of sound is a fundamental musical parameter in electronic music. Electronic music doesn't exist naturally in an acoustic space. It's a single sound, it's a monophonic sound. But if you move it, and this is one of the only ways that you can move the sound, because the movement has to be generated at the moment that the sound is made. It's not in mapping, it's not placement of sound post-production. So it's another parameter. The parameters of, that we control with voltages are the amplitude or volume, the frequency or pitch, the timbre or filter. There are a lot of things that we control, and spatial placement is one of them. Now, the kids mostly don't have the tools yet to do this. And I'm trying to impact the Euro rack, designs, so that the kids get a really useful spatial.
So in your in your concerts, like your live concerts, are you sort of like doing improvisations all the time? I mean, you probably, I don't know, have a basic pattern to follow, but or the sounds, but are these since there is the sound that is created at that moment, are you improvising in your live concerts?
Yeah, my concerts are called improvisation on 4 sequences. So the raw material of the concerts is these 4 16-stage rows. It's very contrapuntal. It's a contrapuntal approach to music composition. And with the right tools, I'm able to access those rows in very creative ways and transform them and move from one situation to another. So, there's basic outline, there's basic raw material, basic outline of the concert, but they vary, each one.
Are you able to record those concerts, or is the live experience?
Nope, they're all recorded. I've only released one of them, which was, because it's a lot of work to release an album. But what I'm thinking of now is that the thing that has stopped me is making the vinyl. Vinyl is just such a chore. But I could, and I think what I would like to do is do digital releases of the concerts and put them online, and that, have those, instead of not releasing them because I don't want to do vinyl, I can just put them up online. And
that's easier.
One of my sister's paintings.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Suzanne, what are your thoughts on artificial intelligence?
I think that some of it is more intelligent than what I experience. There's so much music now that suffers from, oh gosh, I don't want to really get into it, but I'm not afraid of it. And I think it's a wonderful tool. And I think it's going to really, help us in many ways. I think, the fear is that it's going to take over, but it's not going to take over. It's a tool. In the early days of the synth, all the musicians were afraid of the synthesizer, that it was going to take over, all their jobs. No more violins, no more flutes, no more. And that's not so. You have to understand what it in fact is good for. And then the other aspect of it is that we need to develop a royalty system based on, the fact is that they're regurgitating and re-delivering existing materials. Mm-hmm. And those need to be, they need to be cited. They need to be credited and paid for.
That would be fair. Yes, one more question. Well, I'm on the break. Okay. So I have actually two more questions. How do you see the future of electronic instruments?
I see the future of electronic instruments. I would like to see them acknowledge some of the designs that Don Buchla created in the 60s and 70s. And he did amazing interfaces, and I'm a big proponent for studying those. And what was the other question?
What new projects do you have in mind?
I am very, very busy now, and I'm doing a lot of projects. In fact, one of them has to do with outer space, galaxies. So I know there is one of the main astronomical sites in Chile.
Yep.
And I'm working with the one in Tenerife, and there's another one in, where is it? Where are was it in Chile or Brazil? Oh my gosh.
No, it's in Chile, in Patagonia. There's a big, astronomical
observatory.
Yeah.
The other one's in Hawaii.
Yeah.
On the Big Island.
Well, that's great.
So that's my project that I have to get busy on really soon.
Oh, that's great. Well, I want to thank you very much. And I was wondering if there's a song that you would love besides the quadraphonic. We're going to listen to a couple of parts of the quadraphonic album. If there's a song that you would like to leave the audience with, which song would you choose?
Oh, I can't think.
Yeah, there's so many. All of them are so good. But we'll listen to quadraphonic, some parts. And I want to thank you so much. Finally, we got to. You have no idea how emotional I was while preparing the interview and reminiscing all the years I did the radio show, and it was just so heartwarming. So thank you so much, Suzanne.
Thank you for being in my life for so long.
Yes, love it. And éxito, have success in whatever you do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gloria. Thank you so much. It's been a total pleasure. Let's take a screenshot. I want to.
How do you do that? Let me do a screenshot too. How do you do that?
Command 3 is on the Mac.
I'll see. Well, let me. Before you leave, I'll do it with the phone actually, because I don't. Okay. There we go. Oh, love it. Thank you so much, Suzanne.
Thank you.
We'll be here with your music. Love you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Con el auspicio de Plenitud, Ciudad de la Alegría, hogarplenitud.org.es, Serenidad Spa Terapéutico, serenidad.es, Permasalud Glamping, permasalud.com.